This is Cecil John Rhodes. We might assume that Cecil is a bit lost, strolling through a very dodgy looking area. However, this assumption is inaccurate. Cecil knows exactly where he is standing and, more importantly, where he could be standing. Although the man became an infamous, oppressive figure in South African history, for our simplified narrative thereof, he smells the gold beneath his feet and is about to do something that will leave a permanent mark on the town. Quite literally, what you are looking at is history in motion. The birth of modern Johannesburg. Rhodes's vision panned out into the urban panorama that is today Marshalltown, the forefather of finance in a city which itself symbolizes wealth, fortune, and gold. However, before all of the hustle and bustle that came to be, the city was a humble shanty town whose inhabitants mined or prospected, but in both cases had an appetite for wealth and an eye on the future. Like most countries on the continent, South Africa had been engulfed by the British Empire and was therefore vulnerable to urbanization and gentrification characteristic of colonization. But besides for the eventual horrors that stained the history of South Africa the following century, the end of the 1800s was a promising time to be a Joburger. The people were young, ambitious, and very, very rich. The British flag was waving. City lights were beginning to shine. All that was missing was recreation, a place to play hard to compensate for the work hard, a place for gentlemen to gather, and although by 1900 the township already boasted 400 bars, a sophisticated place to drink. With this in mind, after buying the land for £72, Rhodes proclaimed the establishment of the Rand Club. It turned out to be a worthwhile walk and a significant investment. The club was built and rebuilt before its third construction, which resulted by 1904 in the design that still stands today. In the heart of the city, where the busy Fox and Loveday streets intersect, the southeast-facing facade welcomes guests with dark timber doors guarded by 4 columns of the Ionic order, which in turn are braced by square blocks. These surrounding squares are a theme of the facade and extend out into bands which wrap around all of the building's external columns and corners. The Rand Club is particularly distinguishable by the contrasting red brick and yellowish plasterwork, and by its surging decorative panels which appear to mimic a sunrise. I would speculate that architects Leck and Emley did this deliberately to foreshadow what the up-and-coming city represented to the British, a fresh start in a new world. The Loveday elevation accentuates 2 balconies which rest just above the entrance and the second story respectively. Leck and Emley made use of plastered brick, corrugated iron and timber, basing their work on Edwardian style, and designed a heavily columnated 5-story design displayed by this section. 5 levels rise above the street and are today utilized by a lobby, a restaurant, and a series of exclusive member-only floors devoted to dining and lounging. There is also a floor submerged below street level, which houses a bookstore. Needless to say, the bar is a lot busier because, well, not even a sentry can get between a Joburger and his drink. The floor plan exhibits the original priorities of the club: leisure. 2 card rooms on the north-facing side of the building are allocated relatively large square footage, along with an adjacent private dining hall. Today, that area has been transformed into a function room. On either side of the Loveday Street facade, and on both of the other 2 elevations of the Marshalltown masterpiece, the exterior displays raised parapets. The Loveday Street frontage is privileged with arch pediments on top of the second row of windows, the rhythm of which is maintained up until the 4th repetition, where tiny mullions mimic the Ionic columns at the club's entrance, dividing the windows into 3. Above the parapet, ornamented arches highlight the logo of the club, and 2 large pediments, either side of a central section, terminate the building in trabeation. In the pre-globalization days, for an idea to travel across the ocean, it required an explorer and an intention. Be it through propagating culture, techniques, or missionary work, it was the job of the foreigner to inspire the local, and to inspire with conviction. Thus, whilst Cass Gilbert's Custom House in New York City, now the National Museum of the American Indian, may have inspired aspects of the Rand Club, it is difficult to say whether these similarities are intentional or just happenstance. In fact, the symbolic colonialism that some identify in the Rand Club is a sworn enemy of the rich native culture housed in the National Museum of the American Indian. Therefore, any parallels would want to be avoided. Nevertheless, architectural language evidently transcends this conflict, because the Custom House, which was actually completed after the Rand Club in 1907, features the same arched pediments above the second floor's windows. Additionally, the museum also incorporates a decorative parapet towards its top, as well as the similar idea of four columns spotlighting the entrance. However, whilst the South African structure keeps its columns in ionic order and in proportion to the rows of windows, the custom house vies for the Corinthian style and stretches out its columns over 3 stories, emphasizing the large focal arch forming the building's opening. Gilbert's design features a rotunda rounding out the lobby, but the Rand Club has its own circular shape. As we'll see, it is far less prominent relative to its interior environment. That may be because it simply does not need to distract eyes upwards. The lobby, as is the physical manifestation of VIP. Guests are greeted by a beautifully crafted iron staircase to the right, which tapers outwards and upwards into 2. Immediately to the left of the entrance hall, an operational cage elevator is on standby, for members only of course. The tones of green in the marble columns and the classy brown timber finishes remind the guest of the prestigiousness of the venue, and therefore the required decorum. A peek up the grand stairs reveals a member-only dining area. But let us keep the suspense of the vertical and detour horizontally into the restaurant. To do this, visitors must stroll through an arched tunnel decorated with stained glass. The natural light in the building is sustained in the restaurant, which perpetuates the glass by means of arcuated windows, thereby giving the indented mansard roof panels and familiar ionic columns a royal glow. One is naturally drawn to the aforementioned staircase, and for good reason. The red carpets entice the visitor with curiosity. I was fortunate enough to be allowed to take a look and was seriously not disappointed. To most effectively encapsulate the design and the special atmosphere of my findings, let me take you on a virtual tour. The first thing you will notice is the magnificent ribbed dome, like an umbrella for the staircase, which gives the building vertical thrust, before the light blue walls and classic paintings of the second floor steal the show. Venturing out onto the balcony gives a close-up perspective of the detailed ornamentation of the enveloping facade. Note the detail of the brackets. Both interiorly and exteriorly, the building seems to imitate a social hierarchy. The higher up you go, the more distinguished you feel. This is reinforced by the 7-star hotel, which is incorporated into the 4th and 5th floors. It probably goes without saying, but I was not able to sneak my way up this time. As beautiful as the aesthetic of the Rand Club is, it was actually upon looking away from the ornamentation and out of a window that I was hit with a philosophical pensiveness that turned out to be the most profound of all my experiences in Marshalltown. Over the semester, we have been studying the evolution of buildings, the prominence of which has mostly been defined by height, framework, and level of technological sophistication. Johannesburg is certainly no exception to this improvement and emboldening of the urban skyline. However, by holding up a mirror to the past, as the Rand Club's southern neighbour quite literally does, and engaging in appreciation for where it all began, it became clear to me that fancy glass envelopes and fully automated elevators, while certainly dwarfing the Rand Club in size, will never do so in character. It is true that the boom of Johannesburg stemmed from gold, and indeed, many of the swanky skyscrapers that now surround the building are devoted to this cause. But the Rand Club is devoted to the people. Which is more precious, the mineral or the citizen, I'll leave up to you.